Hi everyone. So today I'd like to start doing a small web series, um, just a series of videos on the opening of the key in tarot. Um, it's considered to be, by many, one of the most potent spreads out there, um, but I have also found it to be one of the most difficult spreads out there too. It requires a lot of background knowledge on various stuff. It's just a lot of stuff kind of put together, but in a way that somehow works. It's a non-positional spread. Right? I mean, I'm sure some of you have heard of this spread. It was created by the Golden Dawn, sort of the founding institution of modern tarot, because either if you subscribe to Arthur Edward Waite or Aleister Crowley, both of those men were in the Golden Dawn. Both of them have sort of shaped tarot for the modern era. Um, oh, sorry, hair in my mouth. Very becoming. But I think it's a very important spread because it so accurately predicts things and gives us subtleties in our reading that is sort of unmatched by positional spreads. I believe positional spreads have a place. I think they make divination easier, and they're great learning devices. I think it's for general clientele. It's best to do something like the Celtic Cross, which is so general that you can pull a lot of information about a querent specific circumstance. But the opening of the key is good for stuff that's more important than day-to-day musings, though it can be used for that too. That's sort of the interesting thing about it. You can use it simultaneously for very profound questions or for sort of general mundane stuff too. It's not a spread I would do daily, because technically it is 5 operations long. Each of those operations uses a different, I guess I should say, interface, based on different rulerships. For instance, the first operation is ruled by the aces and the princesses. The second operation by the rest of the courts, I believe. And so essentially every sort of power of the tarot is eventually represented. All the majors are eventually represented, all the courts, and all the pips. So it's as holistic an interpretation as you can possibly get. But like I said, it's very difficult. It is sort of the culmination of a lot of pre-20th century divination techniques. If you look at historical spreads, a lot of them are like this, sort of non-positional, linear, story type spreads. But what makes the opening of the key so unique is its particular methodology is very interesting and useful. Basically, it functions on elemental dignities and card counting and pairing. And elemental dignities are sort of the major rule that is the most difficult, I think, to start understanding and using in your readings. But it is very interesting once you do start to develop your own usage of them. In general, uh, elemental dignities are based on triads of cards. And so I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to just, in this video, talk about the general scope of the spread, my experiences with it, and I think in subsequent videos I'll be going into the mechanics of it. There will be a video for, elemental dignities and card counting and pairing, which the latter two are not difficult at all. And then we'll get into the actual operations and what you need to know to be able to read them. Okay, so my experience with this spread, I started trying to learn this spread back when I just started, and in some ways that was a good thing, in some ways that was a bad thing. It's grossly overwhelming the first time you do it, but I do promise that it somehow manages to get easier. It's just something you have to practice like anything. And the first time I did it, I was utterly lost, so lost. I had no idea what was going on. Because it's long and it gives you a lot of information to process, and that's sort of why I recommend writing it down. I've done some of these where I haven't written them down, and you lose a lot because it tells you so much, and it's best to even if just as you go from triad to triad or from pairing to pairing, just jot down whatever idea comes in your head about them. And just eventually, if you want to go back, you can sort of recreate the narrative element. But it's best to just sort of write it all down, I think. And while that sort of tacks on some extra time to the amount of time it takes to do a full 5-operation opening of the key, I think it's worth it so that you can reflect on it in the future. The spread usually takes me about 2 hours, and that's usually the response I hear from other people who have tried this spread. 2 hours, sometimes minimum. And I know that sounds daunting and sort of mentally exhausting, but actually once you get in the flow of it, it just sort of unravels itself, and it actually is less taxing than you might think it is. At least once you get used to it. The first time you do it, it will be slightly grueling, or at least it was for me. I mean, I had a really, really hard time the first time I did it. But I forced myself to keep doing it, and 2 years later, I can sort of do it, at least for myself. And that's also where I think the spread comes in handy, and I think it's much more profound than the Celtic Cross, because even though the Celtic Cross can be used for contemplation and sort of self-analysis and thinking about yourself and where you are in your life right now, I think the opening of the key is sort of more, it always tends to go deeper, beyond that sort of general level of events and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not sure what it is, but it's just, there's something about it, and I don't know if if it gets you in this sort of contemplative mood, and so you start seeing things in the reading that you wouldn't necessarily see in a basic positional spread. But I do think that some of the things it tells you that you're doing or what's going on are sometimes so honest and so accurate. It can be very unsettling sometimes. I've done my most unsettling readings for myself have been using the opening of the key, and those have been, I mean, downright shocking, some of them, and have really forced me to reanalyze certain aspects of myself and my life and how I'm letting myself be controlled by other things or not. And that's sort of the hub of the whole purpose for doing such a reading. It gives you a tremendous amount of power to deal with a situation, because you will see the situation from so many viewpoints. The viewpoints of others, how others are influencing it, how external forces are influencing it, and how you've been sort of putting your own hand in all that. And yeah, it allows you to evaluate that sort of impartially, and to then make up your mind as to whether or not that's what you want to continue doing. It shows you patterns in your life a lot. Definitely does that. And so I find it very useful for sort of seeing the very broad scope of one's life. there's sort of something karmic about it. And like I said, it's hard to sort of pinpoint exactly what it is, but it is tremendously useful, tremendously powerful. It's the most accurate spread I have ever used. I swear by it. So yeah, so then it's just a matter of learning the mechanics. So again, 5 operations. There's it starts off with 4 piles associated with Yod He Vav He, the holy name Tetragrammaton. Then you do the 12 houses of the zodiac. The 12 signs of the zodiac is the 3rd operation. The 4th operation is the 36 decanots of the zodiac. And then the last final operation is the Tree of Life, representing the pips 1 through 10. So, and in all of these, you've chosen a significator for yourself, or the querent, or the situation, and you're looking through the piles that you create. You're looking for the significator in these piles, and then you read it like a story. So that's also sort of the skill you have to be willing to develop, and I think that's sort of what writing it down helps with, the narrative element of it, because sometimes it's sort of hard on the fly to be like, all right, this is what's going on. Whereas if you force yourself to kind of write it out and just write down your impressions of it, it's sort of easier to get the linear scope of it. It's a little less daunting that way. And the other thing about it is that, you read every spread essentially twice. So the first time you do card counting from the significator, and then you do card pairing, usually from the ends. Some people do away from the significator. I advocate doing from the ends. That's just how I taught myself to do it. So essentially you're reading the thing twice, each one. So in some ways you're doing 10 spreads, more or less. And the first time you do the card counting, it tells you generally the flow of the story, and then the card pairing tends to fill in the general details, other little things that are useful while still following the same story arc. It's very interesting how coherent it is. Again, it's a shocking spread, I think. But anywho, so I will be talking about some of these other things in other videos, and I hope you find them useful. If you have any questions, please send me a little email. Okay? Alright, thanks. Bye.